From earliest childhood, we learn about the world around us by listening to stories. We hear bedtime stories, stories about ourselves and our families. You may have heard Bible stories at a young age. And in Crosswalks, you were immersed in the stories of God and God's people, learning them through art, drama, cooking, music, games, computers, and more. We may not have personally experienced the events of the Bible, but they are a part of our story too. Those stories shape who we are and help us claim our connections to God and one another. That is why we developed what we've called the 5-part story of faith, to provide a framework for our storytelling. In 5 segments, we can share the basic story of our faith and begin to find our own stories within it. Walk with me in our Crosswalks hallway as we explore the 5-part story. The first part of the story is that God loves the world, and we see this in the story of creation, where God creates the world and said, "It is good." God loves the world. The second part of our story is that sometimes we wander far from God, and we learn this through stories of Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, and other stories throughout the Bible. The third part of our story, we learn that Jesus is the way to God. And as we learn about his birth, his life, his death, and his resurrection, we learn that Jesus is the way to God. The Spirit leads us to God is the fourth part of our story. And we see this in the story of Jesus' baptism and in Pentecost and throughout the Bible. Finally, we follow the way of God's love as we live into these stories and make them our own. Here in the story of the Good Samaritan, we find guidance on how to follow Jesus. Any story from the Bible can fit into one of these 5 story segments, and the stories of our lives can find their place in the 5-part story as well. So to review our 5-part story, God loves the world, we wander far from God, Jesus is the way to God, the Spirit leads us to God, and we follow in the way of God's love. This framework provides a way for us to live and tell the story of God and God's people, and we hope you find this helpful in your own faith journey.